Hello everybody, it's Richard here and I'm back with another retro review, and I've got two words for you: Golden Axe. Now, when I say those two words, what immediately springs to mind? For most Sega retro purists, it would be the arcade original, or indeed the Mega Drive, but in both versions you get to play as Axe Battler, Tyrus Flare and Gilius Thunderhead, and you storm across the land of Uria to take on the mighty Death Adder, beat him and get the Golden Axe, which he stole from the Thunder God. Now those games are incredibly cool and definitely well worthy of being classic titles, but the port of Golden Axe I want to talk about is on the Sega Master System. And I know what you're thinking, why are you not playing the Mega Drive version? That version is far superior. You get all three characters, you get an extra level, and the battle with Death Adder is much more epic. Well, I totally agree, the Mega Drive is a classic version, but I've always had a fondness for 8-bit titles, and even as a little kid was just amazed when Sega would try and port an ambitious title onto a console such as the Master System to see what could be done and how the system could be pushed in many ways. I also didn't get the Mega Drive till much later in its lifespan, so I actually missed the first wave of Golden Axe and only really got to play it on the PS2 Mega Collection on the PS2 several years later, and was absolutely blown away by how good that game looked. And having been on eBay a few times, I'd seen Golden Axe for the Master System. I do remember playing it as a little kid, but also not getting very far, so I was very curious. So having purchased it, I decided to see if this version does hold up, if it is indeed not worthy of the title Golden Axe, whether there is any substance in this game, whether you guys will want to play it. So let's do it, let's review some Golden Axe and let's see if this holds up to the arcade original or if it is just the great pretender.
It's time to sharpen your swords and flex your gaming muscles, as 1989's arcade smash Golden Axe for the Sega Master System offers players an epic 8-bit version of the hack and slash classic, which, although devoid of many bells and whistles that makes the game what it is, works hard to try and give gamers a slice of the action whilst working within the technical limitations of Sega's 8-bit console. Despite making some changes which many might feel a little unfair, reducing the well-known Golden Axe cast from 3 to just 1 and scaling down much of the action so the system can cope, is there enough here to make this a worthy title? Well, it's time to find out in another Dodge This Richard Lucas Gaming Retrospective. So let's get to it. I know what many of you are saying. Again, why would you want to play the 8-bit version when there's a ton of much better ports out there? What about the 16-bit version? Surely reviewing that you would have more to talk about, and there's much more substance in that one and its sequels. Well, again, I love the 16-bit Golden Axe. It is truly a classic, and it would be too easy for me to write a review that gushes over that game. I just have a fondness for Sega's 8-bit titles, because although most individuals had already graduated to the Mega Drive, which had some cracking arcade conversions, I only had its younger 8-bit brother, and I was lucky because Sega really believed in the 8-bit Master System and wanted to try and replicate as much as they could the same elements that made the arcade games and Mega Drive titles a hit, but tried to do it in 8 bits, which was quite challenging. Golden Axe was released for just about every console out there at the time, and it was only natural that the Master System would eventually receive a port. Video game story. The game puts you in control of the huge hulking barbarian Axe Battler, who has been renamed as Tarek for some reason for the purposes of this game. Tarek is out to stop the evil titan Death Adder, who has stolen the legendary Golden Axe, which once protected the land of Uria from evil. The evil tyrant has fled to his castle, which lies on top of an eagle's back far across the sea. Without the axe, the land has predictably fallen into chaos, with Death Adder's foes causing all manner of unrest for the people living there. However, one man, who is the best warrior in the land, decides to put a stop to this evil by questing across it and restoring peace to Uria. That man is Tarek, or Axe Battler, and not only is he extremely well acquainted with the sword, but before leaving, a priest was able to give our hero a choice of magic, like an extra blessing to use on his perilous quest. He can choose either earth, fire or thunder. Each magic has different strengths, and so Tarek must choose wisely, not just the magic, but also when and where to use it. Tarek then sets off alone to start his dangerous quest. Gameplay. The game is essentially a scrolling platform beat-em-up game in which Tarek must move right and face a multitude of different enemies, each with different weapons and attacks. Once he has dealt with the obstacles, he then moves on to the next stage with text to advance the plot. The further our barbarian friend gets, the more difficult the enemies and obstacles become. The game ends once Tarek has beaten the game's 5 stages and defeated Death Adder, or if he runs out of lives and continues. Golden Axe's controls take a little bit of time to adjust to, as when trying to perform certain moves can result in a slight delay before Tarek actually carries out the move. He can swipe his sword at enemies a few times, which starts out looking absolutely fantastic on this 8-bit system, but then often Tarek will stop in his tracks mid-combo, meaning that the enemy can get a few cheap hits in. This may have been an intentional thing to stop the player easily hacking their way through the game, but it can be slightly annoying. Tarek can also dash at enemies and even pick them up and throw them out at times, which means that at least he has a well-rounded moveset, which despite some annoyances will serve him well in his quest to defeat the almighty hard-as-nails Death Adder. The enemies range from typical monsters such as orcs and blokes just wanting a good punch-up, to women riding Bizarrians, which remind me so much of riding the animal buddies in Donkey Kong Country. What's really cool is that you can knock the women off these creatures and steal them and use their powers against the enemies themselves, which is really cool. Once you get used to the game's enemy spawn patterns, it's even possible to make it to the end of a level and use the creature against the boss to save on time and ensuring you take minimal damage. And there's even some Ray Harryhausen style skeletons who are extremely tough and cheap to boot. They cannot be taken lightly and will rinse your health if you try to treat them like a conventional baddie. That's another thing about Golden Axe on the Master System. You get so little health, you only get a few lives and at best 2 continues, which means that you cannot just go in and randomly hack and slash your way through. You need to learn the enemy patterns and really try and get to grips with Tarek and conserve as much health as you can for stage 5, as trust me, you're going to need every bit of help you can get your hands on. Although this version of Golden Axe lacks Tyrus and Gilius, Sega have still given you the option to select magic from the startup screen, which you can use throughout the game. Each magic has a certain amount of strength, with Thunder being the weakest, Earth being somewhere in the middle and Fire being the strongest by far. You can use magic provided you have at least 1 potion, but it is much better to collect potions and build the magic meter up to its maximum level to really make an impact on the enemies around you. How do you collect potions? Well, at certain points in the game you will encounter these little dwarfs carrying sacks. They are notoriously difficult at first to hit, as you must be super accurate. Once you hit them, a potion will fly from their bag. You can repeat this a few times to get them before they run off screen. I should add that in between levels you get the opportunity to get meat, which will refill your health meter also, but strangely they only appear after the levels have finished, where you get almost like a little bonus round to hack the little dwarfs to get the meat. One of the highlights of this game is building up your magic to maximum and then unleashing it in full, as you get to see a little scene of the enemies being surrounded by a spell. I would recommend choosing Fire, as although it takes longer to fill up your meter, the effects are far greater than the others and can really get you out of a bind. Also, don't use magic until you get to the bosses or tougher clusters of enemies on later stages. If you waste magic early on, then you won't get very far without it, as stage 5 can be extremely brutal. This game only really has a small handful of bosses to fight, but they are all pretty memorable. The first level forces you into the deep end, as you have to face 2 hulking bald guys with hammers. I just call them the Hammer Brothers, as I'm not really sure their names. These guys can dole out some massive damage with their weapons and will at times attempt to shoulder barge you, which knocks Tarek down, costing him some valuable health. The most effective way to take these guys on is to grab the Bazarian in the middle of the level and use its tail to whip them down. This ensures they go down quicker than standard attacks and saves you some valuable health. Level 2, Turtle Village, is totally devoid of bosses but does have a handful of tough baddies standing in the way. Level 3, however, more than makes up for this and throws in the return of the, drumroll please, Hammer Brothers, who can be taken down straight away by jump slashing them down the bottomless pit, and then a Knight was a wicked evil long range attack if you get in his way. This is one of those occasions when you should use magic. Fire again is your best bet as it gets him out of the way quickly. Level 4 doesn't have any bosses, and to be honest the skeletons you face are extremely tough anyway, so I think having to face another boss would be agony. And of course we have stage 5, which I will cover in full in just a minute in the final boss video game ending section. Video game presentation. The graphics for this game look really good and are very ambitious for an 8-bit title. You can clearly see that Sega wanted to bring the Golden Axe experience to the 8-bit market. Obviously due to limitations, Tarek and his enemies are missing a frame or two to enable everything to run smoothly. Honestly, I was in awe when I played this. I loved Turtle Village and being able to fight on a giant eagle was so cool. Plus even some of the bosses made it in, although some of them later on look and play really choppy and the AI is not really all that hard to fool, as some can even be lured or knocked down into bottomless pits, saving you a ton of health and headaches. I still absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed the title screen, it just makes me laugh. Seeing Tarek looking all buff and pointing just makes me chuckle. It's very impressive. It's also very clear and obvious that Sega cut corners as you only get 5 levels here, as the Mega Drive did have an extra one, I believe. So the game is very short and can be beaten in about 20 minutes once you get good at the game. The backgrounds are replicated in 8-bit and look fine, and despite the sprites lacking frames and textures again, it wasn't hard to see what was going on. I didn't have any problems with the graphics and they really suited the system well. Final boss, video game ending. Okay, so you have hacked and slashed your way through the 4 levels and now you have to take on the last obstacles before a terrifying battle with the game's main antagonist, Death Adder. The first part of this stage takes place on a giant eagle where you have to face more of those annoying skeletons who are not just what you need. Thankfully you can knock them down into a bottomless pit or get some distance and jump slash them until they expire. Okay, so I do recommend getting the Bazarian creature that this woman rides and then using it to dispatch the oncoming enemies in your path. Try not to lose it as it is extremely essential in allowing you to progress further. Why do you ask? Well, check it out. Remember the night boss from stage 3 and how tough he was? Well, Death Adder has taken out some extra insurance to stop you getting to him. Soon after grabbing the Bazarian, you get a horde of enemies and then 2 knights are sent to kill you. However, if you have the creature, you can easily just time it and blast fire at them until they die. You then get one last opportunity to grab some potions from the dwarves, and then there's yet another giant hammer man whose AI is just insane. At this point, if you lose the Bazarian, it can still be done and you can still beat him. It is however a little tougher, but you just have to grind and watch out for his devastating shoulder barge attack. After he finally buys the farm, 2 more of those annoying skeletons arrive, which really makes things tense due to the unpredictability of their attacks. Still, keep chopping them down and finally Death Adder appears clad in a helmet and holding a massive axe. This guy has definitely been on the roids clearly, and now it's time for the final climactic battle between good and evil. Death Adder does have a skeleton guarding him, so you do need eyes in the back of your head. This battle can be extremely tricky because Death Adder, like all of the baddies, must be in the same line of sight as Tarek for you to score a hit. You have to be really careful as his axe swings are devastating and you can lose some serious health, so watch out for that. I did find the best strategy for me was just to go up and down the screen, taunting him to come near and then going in for a jump slash attack before backing off and then trying to repeat. Occasionally Death Adder will launch a fireball which shoots towards you on the ground, so you need to jump over it or move if you can. The best thing to do is when he launches it is to quickly jump and slash him down. Remember that you have to be directly in front of him to do this. Keep avoiding his axe swings and chop this sucker down. You just have to keep going. It can be frustrating and tense as Death Adder seems to take a lot of hits, but persevere and victory will be yours. Finally, he goes down and you get a nice congratulations screen. Then you get some awesome graphics of Tarek with a text explaining that he's beaten Death Adder and continues to do battle against many adversaries. He even becomes the king and gets the bird and the legendary golden axe which Death Adder stole from the Thunder God. Bonus. There's absolutely no credit screen and no hidden levels, which is kind of a shame, but trust me, the feeling you get from beating this way more than makes up for it. Okay, so what didn't I like about the game? Well, I talked about the choppy frame rate of some of the baddies, which I could live with, but the enemy AI seems to go crazy later on, particularly the skeletons who seem to get faster and faster, and it can be hard to take them down. Also, some of the enemies start to speed up and follow your movements almost precisely. You can use this to your advantage and again get them to fall off cliffs, but I do wish the enemies were just a little less aggressive and more balanced. I mentioned earlier about the slight delay in the controls when Tarek starts to swing his sword at an enemy. He stops after about 3 swipes and no amount of button bashing would let me carry on. I'm all for fairness in video games and I do like a challenge, but they should have fixed this little problem. You cannot gain any more lives on this game and you have to make do with what you have. You get 2 lives and you continue up to 2 times only. The final continue I learnt from the manual, you can only access by holding up and left and pressing button 1 after you've used 1 continue and the game says game over. So why do I have a problem with this? Well, sometimes the extra continue trick didn't work. I'd be mid battle with Death Adder and sometimes couldn't beat him due to the trick again failing me. This meant I had to start again from scratch. Why not just give Tarek 2 continues without any fancy tricks? I have one more thing to say about this game, but I don't know if it is just a bug or whether it's my copy of Golden Axe. Basically, whenever I get to stage 5 and I attempt to move to the right past the giant eagle, the game sometimes will not load up the rest of the screen. There were occasions where I had lots of good runs and was on point to defeating Death Adder, but the game wouldn't let me through to the rest of the level, meaning I had to restart the game and pray the game would show mercy and not glitch out. My theory on why this happens is that this is an overly ambitious game and Sega have a lot going on in it. So admittedly my copy of Golden Axe could be damaged, but I personally think the game is programmed so that you move precisely in a pattern when it tells you to. If you deviate from the game's logic, the game won't load up the rest of the enemies because Tarek is not moving where the game wants you to go. To cut a long story short, the game seems to crash if you don't move in time or you go too quickly on stage 5. It makes a let's play for this game nearly impossible as I can't predict if the game will help or hinder me. Okay, now on to the good stuff. Despite this game not being as smooth as its 16-bit older brother and other ports, I was still blown away by how epic the game was. The controls were a little delayed, but you know what, once I got used to that, I actually got better at the game and was taking down these skeletons like a boss. The graphics and music again is just incredible, and I got so lost in this fantasy world and really felt like an epic warrior as I hacked and slashed through each level. I know most people are like, dude, what are you doing with your life? Play the Genesis version instead. Well, I have, and it's one I will review another time. You see, I grew up with the 8-bit systems and so missed the boat for the Genesis titles, as I wasn't there from its inception, and so had to make do with the Master System. So maybe some of why I love this game is nostalgia, but it's still a game that can be enjoyed. Yes, the game is choppy, lacks frames and is slightly delayed, but get used to the game's inconsistencies and you will find gold in this port of Golden Axe. With all that being said, I give Golden Axe a sword swinging, muscle flexing 3.7 out of 5. Whilst the game is a classic and is enjoyable, it just lacks some elements and polish which would make it an essential purchase. Anyone who buys this and expects a full arcade experience might be disappointed, but if you know what you were getting beforehand and don't mind the problems this game has, then you will gain some enjoyment from it.
Okay, so there you have it, Golden Axe for the Sega Master System. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to check out my Retroplay channel and my videos. Please don't forget to comment, like and subscribe to support the channel. Keep checking back for new retro content, and please don't forget to give me some feedback as well. And join me next time for another Richard Lucas Dodgers review coming very soon. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.